Welcome to the Financial Advocacy Podcast. I'm your host, David Kinder, the tax-exempt wealth guy, registered financial consultant, and chartered life underwriter, and my co-hosts, Michael Moffat and Kurt Gibbs. This is a disclosure where we say you can't hold us accountable for any actions you take on your own, just like all financial entertainment shows. We are not providing legal, tax, or securities investment advice of any kind. We do provide general investment information for educational purposes only, and we will discuss alternative financial strategies that do not contain or include securities. You can view all of our disclosures and disclaimers at our website at www.financialadvocacypodcast.com. Look both ways for across the street. Let's get started. All right, everybody. Hello, welcome. David Kinder here, registered financial consultant, chartered life underwriter, and I think one of my co-hosts will pop in momentarily. So right now it's just me, but what we're going to talk about today is planning for the business owner. Business owners are a completely different kind of person to do planning for than any consumer, than those who are getting close to or in retirement, because they have far more problems and far more to protect. Often it's a lot of legacy planning. It's protecting the business. It's ensuring the business continued survival or the orderly liquidation of the business. There's so many aspects, and everything can be as unique as the business owner themselves who's running it. So I wanted to kind of give an overview of some thought processes that I have, especially because I've been tasked with creating a consulting course for insurance agents and financial advisors. And I've learned a lot about this process during that. But more importantly, such as learning the technicalities, it's getting it to be a simpler conversation. So I hope that you'll forgive me because I'm probably going to trip over some of my words today. I am not the most well-versed, but we're going to have some fun going through this. So the first thing I want to share, I'm going to share my screen here because there's different stages of a business. And of course, I stole this from someone else who created it. So I appreciate that, Kelly, Rich. This is your slide. When we look at a business, often it's the startup, right? Startup lasts for as long as it lasts, maybe up to 5 years. There's a lot of statistics out there, but this doesn't apply just to sole proprietorships. This applies to all kinds of business entities. We're just talking about the survivor, the business enterprise itself, regardless of legal entity. So it doesn't matter, sole proprietorship, corporation, LLC, partnership, doesn't matter. We're just talking about the enterprise getting started and becoming viable. So you have your startup, which is a lot more cash coming in. I'd say stabilize is when you're beginning to become self-sufficient. You don't need borrowed funds. In fact, you've been paying borrowed funds back and you're on top of the bills, right? You're able to actually maybe expand a little bit. That's that third one, which is growth. You'd be able to grow the enterprise, and you grow because if you don't grow, it's going to die, right? It has to keep growing. It has to grow in relevance, has to grow in scale, grow in scope, all those areas for business. Now, in this, it's talking about the next step is now you got to plan for your exit. It's part of business owner planning. I still strongly believe in beginning with the end in mind once it's feasible. So, I watch a lot of Shark Tank, but there's enough of Shark Tank to watch. They can see that some people, they're getting in there and they're just trying to get off the ground. But I start thinking, how did they come up with that business valuation? I mean, they think their business is worth $25 million. Like, where the heck do they come up with that number? I'll guarantee you, they're looking at the potential of that business. They did not do a real full valuation. But if we could begin with the end in mind, even if you're just putting in term insurance in place on the other partners to protect against business loans, there's all kinds of ways to do that. You can start early and get some planning in place. Step 5 there is succession and exit. And then step 6 is post-exit, retiring, and protecting the estate. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of that. And it depends on when we're working with that business. So putting that aside, one of the best ways to begin working with anybody actually is to have a structured conversation. And I start my conversations regarding the 5 ways out of business. What are the 5 ways? So you're in business today. One day you'll be out of business. That's one of 5 ways: death, disability, retirement, voluntary sale of the business, or bankruptcy. And my job is to help you exit your business with the maximum profit for you and your family. It's like, okay, wow, this is big. Now, here's something I'm going to make a competitive remark here. Most investment advisors, or only investment advisors, can only help you with one thing, usually, and it's retirement planning, right? They're going to go in there, they want to sell you on, let us help you set up your 401k for your company. Maybe a pension plan, that's a possibility. They might talk about some life insurance, but investment only people, they're not paid on it. In fact, literally, they don't have a license for it. They should. But if they don't, they're looking at how can we increase their assets under management. They want to offer company 401k plans. They don't do the full job. And by extension, if they're offering the 401k plans, then the bankruptcy discussion kind of fits in with that, because 401k plans and IRS qualified plans, they're often exempt from creditors. So if you declare bankruptcy, they cannot touch that money while the bankruptcy is open. So when I look at the competitive landscape, who does the best job of advising business owners with succession planning? It's the insurance agent, and also to another extent, the financial advisor, who can also help from there. But the insurance agent, they're the ones that can help with the estate planning. They're the ones that can help with the business succession planning. They're the ones that can help with finding the event of the death of a business owner, the disability of a business owner. Retirement, yes. Even if you only had insurance licenses, we can still help with retirement. There's products called non-registered group variable annuities. There's even group indexed annuities. These are for 401k plans and other qualified plans that an insurance agent can offer. You don't even need a securities license. The voluntary sale of a business, that's going to be other plans to keep the business at the highest value possible. And the bankruptcy of a business, again, we talked about creditor protection. So this is probably going to be a shorter video than most, but let's talk about the problems of the death of a business owner. When a business owner passes, who needs money and how much? Who's going to take over that business? This is important. Who's going to take over the ownership of the business? And if that person doesn't want to actually run the business, then who's going to run it? So I want you to imagine you got a family. And hi, Rael, salute to you. So you have a family, and you've got 4 kids. And we're going to assume that they're all legal age. Okay, they're over 18. 2 of them are working in the business. The other 2 aren't. Who's going to take over the business? You might say, well, I'll leave it to the 2 that are. They're the ones that are showing interest. They're the ones that are contributing into the business. Great. How do you make sure that 10 years after you pass, all of your kids still want to get together for Thanksgiving dinner? Oh, this is what we call estate equalization. Estate equalization is where you make sure that you equalize the estate, so that you might have 2 kids that inherit the business, but the other 2, you need to leave with something else that equalizes, that shows that you love them just as much as the other ones. Otherwise, well, you're daddy's favorite, you're mommy's favorite. I don't know. We don't want to create any issues there. Unless you want to do that by design. I'd rather see someone do that by design than by accident. If you do it by design, hopefully they figure out why. Sometimes it's by design for spendthrift provisions, right? In estate planning, you don't want to leave someone that's a spendthrift, or maybe they've abused drugs and things in the past. You don't want to leave them a lot of money. You don't want to put them in a position of responsibility. So what do? You give them enough for sufficient support. So there's different planning for that, but you do that by design, not by default. Planning by design, at least, to make sure that your intentions are followed. So that's what can happen in the event of death. You want to make sure that the estate can be equalized. What about, and this is even more important, what about business loans? If the business owner takes out loans, they usually have a personal guarantee on those loans. If that loan is considered to be in default, and when the business owner passes, it will be considered in default. Got to look at those default provisions. That loan is called in. And what that means is that you have to pay that money now. Imagine you have a $5 million loan that's outstanding. The owner passes away unexpectedly. Where's the money going to come from? And in the order of liquidating a company, creditors come first, before owners, before shareholders, anybody else. It liquidates to satisfy creditors first. It's the same thing with securities. When you look at public companies, the same thing with private companies. So that loan is going to essentially put the business in foreclosure. So what are we going to do about that to make sure that that doesn't happen? Because even if you have all the buy-sell planning in place, you have all the key person planning in place to make sure that the people stay through a business ownership transition, even if you have all that in place, that could all become moot if the business is foreclosed on by a lender. And by the way, the lender doesn't want to do that, but they're going to have to in order to satisfy their loan. So it sucks. What can we do about that? Maybe a loan cancellation plan might make a lot of sense. What else happens in the event of death? Well, does the business owner have their own personal life insurance in place? Well, just because the business owner has a whole lot of assets doesn't mean they shouldn't have insurance. Why not? Because just because you have a business doesn't mean that your surviving spouse should be running it. Have they been running it at this point? Or if you're in partnership, do you want to be in business with your partner's spouse if your partner passed away? I can think of nothing worse. Imagine this. Someone saying, when am I going to get my check? Why is it the check bigger? And this is a person that is not contributing to helping to grow the enterprise. This is a person that is a weight on the surviving business owner. Yet, out of the agreement and the way that the ownership is structured, you have to pay that person out as a partnership. What are you going to do about that? Let's see, what else in terms of death, passing away? So we talked about, yeah. So who's going to take over the business? Who's going to run it? Who's going to get the cash flow? Who's going to come in and be the new partner? So many facets to have considered. All right, let's look at the next one. Disability. Disability is far more likely to happen than passing away. And here it would be my question for a business owner. Are you on your own company's workman's comp policy? And either they know that they're not on it, or it's like, well, why would I be on it? Because it would just increase the cost, right? Most business owners are not covered on their own workman's comp. Well, if you're not covered on your workman's comp, then if you get sick or hurt and you can't work, how are you going to make sure that the bills are paid? Not just personally, but for your business. Would you like your business to survive you having a long-term disability? If you were sick or hurt and couldn't work for 6 months, what would happen to your business? Have you ever done that for a vacation? Have you ever taken a 6-month vacation? Now, that's on your terms, right? Well, imagine if you're sick or hurt, you can't work for 6 months. Would you like your business to still be there when you come back? And for many businesses, the answer is, I'd like it to be, but I don't know how to get that done. Okay. There's ways to do that. I just wanted to see where you're at. So we have some programs on that. First of all, there's individual disability coverage. That covers for your personal bills. That's your own income replacement policy. Sometimes it's coordinated with state benefits. Sometimes it isn't. Depends on the state. But even more importantly, there's a tax deductible program called business overhead expense. And business overhead expense helps you to pay your bills, pay salaries, rents, employees, vendors. Got to look at the policy. I think sometimes inventory is exempt from that, but again, everything depends. Hello, Alonzo. Salute to you. But having a business overhead expense policy can help ensure that your business can still be there, and that your employees will also know that you did all the planning in advance just in case something would ever happen. They'll stay because you did your own planning to make sure that your business is successful, can be successfully transferred. I don't know, I'm just taking that to another extent there. But being able to provide just in case something happens. Now, should a disability last for a long time, there's actually something called disability buy-sell policy. And what that is, combined with the legal agreement of a buy-sell agreement, you can transfer your ownership in a lump sum or through a series of payments, depends on the policy structure, to transition your share of the ownership from yourself to a partner. And this way they can take over the business and, they can take over the business, and then you can be bought out that way. Hello, Mike. Glad to see you.
Good evening. How's it going?
Hey, we're doing okay. I'm just doing an overview of the 5 ways out of business. And right now I'm into disability, talking about business overhead expense, a little bit about how that works, and then a little bit on disability buy-sell agreements. So, buying out a business ownership interest in the event of your disability, you can sell your business and, you keep the proceeds of the policy. And if there's a difference between the appraised value and the insurance proceeds, you can work that out as an arrangement of payments or something like that later. Um, in a way, you'd kind of hope that the insurance would be more than the value of the business, but I don't think you really want that because that means the business has been going down in value. So that's not usually a good scenario there. So anyway, the next one, I'm just kind of ripping right through these, but the next one is retirement planning. And there's 3 areas of retirement planning for a business owner, and it kind of depends. I'm not going to say that there's one that's inherently better than the other, but a combination of all 3 properly optimized can be pretty neat. So the first one I think is the one that Mike and I are the biggest fans of, which is tax exempt retirement. Mike, you talk a little bit about that one. Come on. Otherwise, it'll be me in a monologue.
Well, I mean, I guess I should start with, so the biggest thing, I guess, in retirement is a couple fold. I mean, you're going to have the tax risk associated with retirement, where that's going to start to eat away at some of your overall retirement funds, right? Whether or not taxes go up or down in the future. As anybody's guess, if I were to guess, unless Trump can somehow magically fix our debt with tariffs or whatever else, in all probability, taxes will have to go up to a certain degree, especially if we see something like Medicare for All system implemented or something like that to pay for something along those lines, because that's not free, right? So there's certainly the tax risk involved, and this is for, I guess, business owners and even individuals. We can talk about these things. So there's tax risk. Then as far as your other accounts go, whatever your business is invested in, whether, it was other things that your financial advisor set you up for at the time, or same with an individual, you're going to have fluctuations in the market. So market risk is another one. And that's where the famous, 3, 4%, 5%, or if you listen to Dave Ramsey, 12 to 15% rule comes in. So there's a lot of different things there. And then, of course, you got to figure in rising costs of healthcare and all kinds of other things into this equation. But in reality, probably the biggest drain in retirement is going to be market risk and taxation. And that's where you come up with that 3% rule. And if you're having to pay a higher tax on that 3%, are you going to have to take out more than the 3% to have the same standard of living, which then hurts your longevity of those funds? So there's a trade-off there. So if, you can find a place that where you could put your money, where you could have a third or less in the right place, wouldn't that be more advantageous and be able to spend better than even if you had 3 times as much money in the wrong place? So that's kind of where the strategy that we like to implement comes in.
That's pretty much exactly right. And let's look at your tagline there: tax exempt, tax deduction. So it's one of the fun things that with cash value life insurance properly deployed, you can use it while you're building it to help you grow your business, because it's an accessible line of credit based on the amount of cash values that's in there. And when you borrow against it for business purposes, and by the way, I just saw a TikTok with somebody, and he was trying to say, no, this is not how it works. No, this is exactly how it works.
They always say that.
Well, this guy, he's very knowledgeable, but I think he misinterpreted. He was talking about borrowing money to buy life insurance. That has certain limitations, and so, and I could,
Yeah,
find that
that's like premium financing.
that's part of that, yeah. And I think it limits like $50,000. I don't know. There's a whole thing, and I remember looking it up a couple of years ago. I didn't save it, but I can always find it later. I'm not going to look for it now. But when you borrow against an established policy, and you're borrowing it for the purpose of producing a profit, you're doing it for business purposes of whatever it is. As long as you have that intention, and the loan proceeds are used for that purpose, it doesn't matter where you get it from. So the loan interest is tax deductible regardless of the source.
Right. And the other positive to that, I don't know if you probably didn't touch on this yet, but the other nice thing is that it doesn't matter if you need money and you have cash in the policy. You pick up the phone and you say, insurance company, send me the money, and they send it to you. There's no there's no credit check. There's no appraisal of the business that needs to be done. There's no, drawing of blood. They don't make you do anything.
We did that when we get the policy.
To get the policy, but to get the money out, right? I mean,
right.
And actually a lot of, well, anyway, right. So the money is there and it's readily accessible when you need it. For example, if you have a lull in the business and you are going to have maybe even trouble making payroll, you could use it to do payroll temporarily, or you could use it if you get a lot of orders that come in all of a sudden and you can't fund the orders, you can take a loan out against your policy to fund the purchase of the orders. So you think of it, you want to buy a vehicle, you want to buy supplies, whatever it is, that money is there to access. And I think, what was it? We heard a story one time that somebody told in one of our group meetings that there was a guy down in Louisiana, and after Katrina, he couldn't get a loan. And so he wanted to buy, what was it, like a wood cutting machine or something to.
Let's go with that. That sounds right. I know which store you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get a loan for the bank to do it because what collateral did he have?
Yeah. And so he had cash in his policy, and he went and started a business, whether it was helping clean up houses or using it to cut up trees or whatever it was. But he took the collateral in his policy and used it to start that business and turned that, whatever that loan was, let's just say it's $50,000. I don't know what it was, but just for round numbers, and turned it into, several hundred thousands of dollars that he made off of that. Now, and that's the other thing. You won't always, there's something like that, you might not always have access to funds, regardless of what your credit looks like. Banks just might not be loaning money at the moment because of a natural disaster or things going on, in the world or the economy or things like that. They might just tighten up lending restrictions for a while. So having access to that collateral when you need it on a moment's notice can be very important and beneficial to your business and even to you as an individual.
Yeah, having access to all lines of credit, regardless of source, in advance of emergency or opportunity is always good. Because now the nice thing about life insurance is that when banks say no, your life insurance automatically says yes, because you are the owner of the policy. You have the fundamental right by contract to access your cash values at any time, as long as you have cash values in there. Now, you can only get up to, like, let's say 95% at the very most. Every insurance company is going to be a little different, because you actually have to be able to post the interest 1 year in advance. That's what they call interest in arrears. But even if you only use it for 6 months, they'll prorate it back. That's not a problem there.
Yeah, I always like to say 90 to 95%. That way there's a cushion there. 95% would probably be the max I would take, but anything 90% or lower is more than safe. So
yeah, absolutely. So if you have the available funds, so like that guy, the story was the guy was in Louisiana. This is New Orleans, however you say it, New Orleans. And the guy saw an opportunity, but the bank could not grant the loan because banks do not see opportunity. Banks often just see risk. And one of my favorite movies is Catch Me If You Can. I actually used that as loss prevention training when I was a bank manager. And so one guy, Frank Abagnale's father goes in and says, I just need some time, somebody to beat these guys. It's not a question of degree, or it's not a question of winning. It's a question of risk. Of course, he said, look, you're the biggest freaking bank in the world. Where's the freaking risk? I'm almost quoting verbatim there. But the thing is that when the banks and other lenders say no, your life insurance must say yes. So that's one huge advantage there. Now, going to the other part, which is tax deductible retirement planning. Now, often we're kind of negative on that, but at the same time, part of it is managing your taxes today, as long as you know what the future of those contributions is going to mean. So I'm not fully against it. You just need to be fully informed. So I don't mind a cash balance pension plan or a 412(b)(3) pension plan. And the reason I like those is because you can legally discriminate against 60% of your employees. These are owner-focused, massive owner contributions into these plans. So you could put in $300,000, for example, and I'm going to use a rough number, $260,000 of it goes to you, and the rest of it goes to the employees that you choose. But the neat thing is that because it primarily goes to you, obviously you get the full $300,000 deduction in the year that you contribute, but most of that is going to be for your benefit. And it obviously favors the older that the business owner is. By the way, hello, Daryl. Glad to see you on.
Daryl, what's up, man?
So, but the thing about these cash balance and 412(b)(3) plans, based compared to the other plans, you cannot discriminate as much. And discriminate sounds like a terrible word, but the fact is that these are plans that are created by the wealthy for the wealthy to stay wealthy. Let's get that out there. The tax code is often written by the wealthy. The question is, can we take ethical advantage of it ourselves? What can we do to put ourselves in the best position possible? And part of that is a balanced approach between pension plans and cash value life insurance. By the way, the pension plan can also buy cash value life insurance, but once it's in the plan, it is also taxable. Right. It's an interesting thing on there. In fact, I recently learned this a couple of months ago, you can actually do a lump sum exchange of the cash value of the policy out. So let's suppose you have $300,000 cash value in the policy in the pension. You have $300,000 outside of it. Swap them out. You can do that as long as it's dollar for dollar. You can buy the policy out. Doesn't change the taxation of those funds in the pension, but it does mean that you can have the policy outside of the pension plan later on. So that was pretty neat. When I heard that, I was like, "That's a game changer." Really excited to hear that. The other one, retirement planning, is actually leveraging the business itself. There is stock recharacterization, where you, and of course, in order to do stock recharacterization, you have to make your business a corporation. And as a corporation, you want to issue more than one share of stock. It has to be a C corporation. So you might decide, you know what, it's time to retire Grandpa. Let's make him a preferred shareholder, and then let's make the remaining family members common shareholders, so we can participate in the growth. But the preferred stock gets interest income, and however that works. Now, I might have butchered a little bit of that conversation because I'm still learning about it. I'm still writing about it because I'm getting that information from various sources. Here's the only downside of that is that it's still counting on the current business cash flow to fund retirement planning. So I'm okay with that. That's why I like it to be a balanced approach. But, if we can optimize all of it, it can be a beautiful thing. So that's kind of on that one for the retirement planning. Now, for planning for the voluntary sale of the business, that part comes in. Get rid of that notification. The voluntary sale of the business is making the business attractive enough that an outside buyer wants to buy. Venture capital, private equity, or, hey, maybe your competitor down the street would like to buy you up. If you can make it attractive enough, well, what would make a business attractive? It has to be more than just the sum of its parts. In fact, the sum of its parts is called the book value. A business should not be selling for the book value, and that's all you're doing is transactional stuff. You're just fulfilling order. I don't know. If you're barely doing anything, then you can sell it for book value. But if you have some magic in your people, magic in your processes, magic in your branding, magic in how you relate to your customers, there's a value there, and that's called goodwill. And that's where you're able to sell your business for above that value. And it depends on how it all happens, and that cannot happen without people. So if you want to make your business very attractive, you need to keep your key people so that it becomes too expensive, too costly to them to leave and either create their own enterprise or to be lured away by the competitor. Because if they get lured away, how many of their key contacts, how many of their key customers are going to go with them? So we make it financially costly for them to ever leave. Because what they should be saying is that doesn't mean that they're not going to be courted. So, you got your competitor down the road, they're talking to your key executive, maybe they're the head of sales, right? And the head of sales should be saying, well, I've got this key retention package, and I need to make sure you can match it. I got this life insurance policy we got 5 years ago, but I just got my diabetic diagnosis. So I need to make sure you can match what they got for me. And I need to make sure that you can, all these. And so you got to make sure that, and that key person in a position of strength. They might match it, they might not, but you've got to make sure that they pay up, which also means that do they know the value of the entire employment package that they have? That's an important, quite frankly, a business owner's sales disclosure. There should be something that says, this is the value of the package that we're offering you to make sure that you stay. And you couple that with a vesting provision to make sure that they stay for X number of years so that after, let's say, the 10th year, they finally get to keep the whole thing. Whatever it is. And that can be customized for each employee. And obviously, those are as discriminatory as you want. Again, there's that word again. No one likes that word because it sounds like it's evil and racist because we're discriminated. But the fact is, you get to choose. You get to hand pick. That's the best word to use. Hand pick who you want to have these benefits.
They're somewhat discriminatory just in and of themselves if you can't even pass underwriting.
Yeah, well, and what is it? The life insurance business is the longest lasting legal, moral, ethical Ponzi scheme in human history. But the question is, can it get you in?
And do you qualify?
That's it. Can it get you in? Can it get you to qualify? And can you stay long enough for the Ponzi scheme to pay out to you? Right? That's the idea, quite frankly. But it's legal, it's moral, because it has these other intrinsic benefits of, paying out these benefits. But yeah, you've got to have a quality program in place to keep your key people. Because if you can't do business without them, you can't afford to lose them, which means what would it cost you to lose them? You need to figure that out so that you put a plan in place so that they don't want to leave. Also, we could put into place a salary continuation plan for the beneficiaries. Now, I think Google actually does this. So I'm going to start using that as a case study because I think Google, if you pass away, they have like a 10-year salary continuation for your family. Now, Google's a massive company, okay? But can you adapt something like that for your top people? Something has got to be there because if you have an employee benefit package that is so good, it's sometimes better than money. Now, if you got key people, you better be paying them well. Otherwise, I mean, if you're paying them $20 an hour, they're not a key person, are they? So,
I mean, you could even use life insurance to fund something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's an inexpensive term policy, right? So,
well, yeah, and for someone's passing, yeah. And if we use a permanent policy, we might use a split dollar type of a strategy where
I'm just thinking from an economic perspective for a smaller business that might not have the kind of money to do a split dollar or a permanent plan. Like let's say a key employee is making $100,000 a year, and you want to offer something like that for their beneficiaries if they were to pass, getting them $1 million, 10-year term or 20 or 15-year term, and then renewing it if they're there longer than that. That could be a very economical way for a business to do that, and then they could continue to pay them, or they could just give them a lump sum of the $1 million up front for their 10 years worth of ongoing salary. So just something that's a little economical, as opposed to for smaller businesses, as opposed to having to do some more complicated things. If you had a partner or something and you're in a little shop, that could be.
They don't have to be massive policies. So, for example, my dad, he ran the Orange County Courthouse cafeteria in Santa Ana for however many years. I think I've mentioned it before. It's the first job I was fired from. I don't love the nepotism in the family here, but no, there's no nepotism in my family. My dad fired me at the age of 13. But one thing, he had an assistant manager years ago. And now at the time, I'm going to put some context to it. At the time, if there were IRA contributions, the maximum you could do is $2,000 a year. So we're talking about the early to mid 90s. I think he was doing $6,000 a year into a life insurance policy on him. So not a huge amount. That's $500 a month. And after a few years, that he finally decided he moved. He left. He moved to Minnesota, Michigan, somewhere up there. I don't remember exactly where. This is at least 15, 20 years ago now. But my dad gave him the policy. And by the way, when you, as far as transfer for value issues, you can transfer the policy back to the insured because he's the insured, and there's no ramifications there. So he gave the policy back to him. But that's another way to do it. And so $6,000 a year. Now, today, okay, we might be looking at 15 or 20. Let's be at the higher end of the 401k contribution schedule, maybe. But, just to be willing to set that up, this is additional compensation, additional benefits for that person. Yeah. Anything can be done. And so it doesn't have to be huge, but at the same time, if it's not big enough, is it worth it? So
right. Yeah. I mean, it has to be.
If you're going to do $1,000 a year for a term policy, oh, well, thank you, but I could have done that. I mean, there's no value there. That's like, I could have done that.
Well, yeah. So let's just say it's a large term policy. Maybe say $4 million or something on a 40-year-old male, and that costs you. Just throwing a number out there. $300, $350 a month. Something, I don't know, probably less than that, but just on a 25-year term to make sure you keep them until they retire. Is it worth $300, $400, whatever it is a month to make sure that you keep that person for the next 25 years? I mean, that's a pretty inexpensive investment to make sure that your good people don't go anywhere.
And then there's the potential for converting some of that over time and turning that into what we call executive benefit programs, or tax exempt cash flow. So you turn that into, let's carve out $250,000 of death benefit. Let's make that into a 10-pay.
Yeah, you could carve out, however much you want of it up to the full death benefit, right? So exactly. you could convert, over that, let's just say it is a 25-year term. Over that 25 years, you could convert portions of it as an executive bonus, over that 25-year period, so that the longer they stay, the more that they're getting in a permanent policy for being there longer.
Exactly. And you put in a vesting schedule into the agreement. And the only other thing to think about is 101J requirements, but that's on key person policies that benefit the business. So correct. Your key person dies and the benefits are paid to the business. There's an annual disclosure requirement for as long as that policy is in force. That person still has the right to know. It's a notice of consent requirement, required form. It's one of those things that was in the Pension Protection Act of 2006. Why do I remember that? Because it stuck out in my head, just like the 5/8 of 1% of Social Security. Go figure. Let's see. The last part on exiting a business is planning in advance in the event of a possible bankruptcy. And that's adding divorce. Both of those things can be nasty depending on the size and the nature of the business. The smaller the business, the bigger issue a divorce can be. That's for sure. I've watched a little too much Kitchen Nightmares, Restaurant Impossible, Hotel Impossible, and the owners are bickering with each other, and it's having a tremendous impact on, and not in a good way, on all the staff, the employees, the customers are overhearing this stuff. It becomes a nightmare. So one of the things that in advance, before things get too deep, is that you might want to be, and I don't know how you sell this, but the idea is that you get into a post-nuptial agreement. So this is an agreement you could get into after you're married to make sure you're looking out for the best interests of each other. But I would look at the business like a child. You're coming together for the benefit of the child, the benefit of the well-being of the business, to make sure that the business remains intact so you can make the best decisions for the business. Because if the business implodes while the married couple are bickering, you're both going to be able to split up a whole lot of bills and a whole lot of debt and a whole lot of nothing that's left afterwards if the business is ran into the ground like that. So sometimes just having that agreement, It might even possibly help the relationship, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to bring a sense of order, a sense of security during a time that you're having marital trouble. Um, it's a little different than trying to prepare for a will, because we're preparing for a will. You're like, okay, if I happen to die too soon, who's going to take care of my kids? Who do I want to get my stuff? And you just think that's going to be responsible. But doing a postnuptial agreement, you're almost thinking like, okay, am I predicting that I'm going to get divorced? Am I putting the seeds in? I mean, it's the psychology, right? And what we have to think of, it's not about you. It's about the business. It's about the longevity and the surviving nature of the business. Can the business survive while you guys are bickering? And if not, you got to do something. And that's one possible step. But bankruptcy, going back into that, one of the best things, and this is all state specific. In fact, I was having a consultation with another agent earlier today, and unfortunately, she didn't know that there was almost no creditor protection of annuities and life insurance in California. So I sent her the document, like, okay, this is so you have it. You better study up on this thing, because I think she's been unfortunately misrepresenting it. But it's state specific. So life insurance and annuities, state specific. For IRAs, 401k plans, pension plans, those are much higher limits in general for being protected from creditors. And I think even here in California, it's like $1.5 million. So you have a lot that, if you've got a lot of money socked away in those plans, it's protected from creditors. So even if your business fails, after the bankruptcy case is closed out, you've entered a payment arrangement or whatever it is, they still can't touch that money. Now, here's the other side of it. Neither can you. And I happen to know this because it was a weird thing. I was helping this guy years ago, 15 years ago. I think I've shared this before, helping him to move over a brokerage IRA into an annuity IRA. And everything was going through fine. I shared with him how the annuity contract would work, and we started to move the funds. And by the way, it was at the same brokerage I was working for, so it's going to be easy. But once the brokerage side received the transfer request, they could not follow through with it because he still owed about $16,000 worth of back child support. So I'm like, wow, okay, so creditor protection, they couldn't get at it, but neither can he. He can't withdraw from it or anything unless he fulfills that obligation. So anyway, long story short, he did consent to, go ahead and pay that money out, get the child support paid. It happened to go into a bonus annuity, and so MetLife paid his child support back to him. That was kind of cool. But yeah, with bankruptcy, it's nice that if the business is going to go down in tubes, you can walk away with something because you planned in advance. And I don't think there's any recapture provisions, meaning as long as you're not, okay, 60 days before you file for bankruptcy, if you're trying to hide, $500,000 into a pension plan, good luck keeping it there. I think there might be a time limit for how long funds will be allowed to be there during the open case. I am not giving legal advice. I'm just saying that if I were a court doing bankruptcy court proceedings, I'd be like, okay, you just try to hide $500,000 by putting it into your pension. I don't think that's going to fly. So maybe they meant look back for the past year of your transaction to make sure that you're being fully open and honest with the court. But other than that, and that's a guess, I have no idea. It sounds right to me. But if you've been making all those contributions all that time, they can't touch it. They might as well be able to leave the business with having something rather than nothing. So that's one of the things I love talking about is if I can help you exit your business with the maximum profit for you and your family, would it make sense to get together? And there's so many areas. So I think we talked about maybe 15 different areas of planning. And I don't know if it's feasible for a business to try to do them all. It really depends on what your priorities are. But most importantly, if you're not here, what's going to happen to the business? What'll happen to your family? If you are disabled and can't work, what's going to happen to your business? What's going to happen to your family? If you're trying to retire, what do you want to have happen to your business? What's going to happen for your family? You're going to sell the business. Okay, what's going to happen to your business? And how much you're going to get for it that's going to happen for your family? I mean, it comes down to both of those things. And really, we're talking about two different checkbooks. We're talking about the business checkbook and your personal checkbook. And unfortunately for our society, there isn't a whole lot of rescuing business owners from bad planning or improper or missed planning opportunities. All right, you have the planning in place when you need it. Like a parachute. Either you have it in place when you need it, or you're not going to need it anymore. I mean, it's sad, but I here's the thing about business owners too. They've got to be able to handle being blunt, and that's one of the things I like about business owners. Business owners should be able to appreciate bluntness on their behalf. Now, no one likes being blunt at them, right? Don't go tell me to go kiss rocks. I don't want to. Don't be rude at me, but you can be bold to help me see that there's a problem and realize. And they have to respect that. They may not like it at the moment, but they have to, at least that person is going to tell me the way it is. Tell it like it is. And all you got to do is figure out what's the most important priority here. Now, this kind of planning and such, when I'm open, again, I'm working on this course. When I'm going to start offering it, it will be on a fee-for-service basis, particularly for analysis work. We're going to be doing the business valuation. There will be a fee for service charge for that. There will be a fee for putting the plans together, coordinating all the tax laws, the state laws, and all this stuff, figuring out how we're going to put this plan in place. But what's the alternative? The alternative is you don't do anything and you can lose everything you've put together. And in fact, what Ben Feldman or Mar Feldman, both of them, they've all said that, help you to keep together what you spent your entire life to put together. The whole idea, because the business, as long as it continues to be relevant, and that's not something I can help with directly, other than the fact that have access to capital when you need it, especially during a succession. That's the If you wanted to reinvent a business, all you got to do is get into a new product line, get into something new of research and development, some way to reinvent. You got to keep the business relevant. But that's not something I can do. My job is just to make sure you have capital in place. So let's suppose you have someone, you're 75. Your oldest son is, let's just say he's 35, 40 years difference. And that, I don't want to leave him with everything. I don't want him to put the money into the ground or put the business into the ground. Well, why don't you set up a training and growth fund? Set up a life insurance policy that's designed for him to take risks with that money that's not going to sink the company. Let him do some things with it. I got that idea from Sanjay Talani. I kind of like that idea. I haven't worked that into the course yet, but whatever we could do to minimize risks for the business, keep it relevant, keep it current, and provide the funding for it is all that much the better. And especially if we're increasing the amounts that we're borrowing from banks, having increasing collateral that make a better business risk to lend to, that much the better too. That's even better for the balance sheet. So many areas. I just wanted to kind of touch on this. So for any business owners that happen to listen, there's so many areas. The question is, what's most important for you now? Does it make sense to figure out what it is and what the extent of the risk is, and put something in place to help protect that business going forward? Because if we don't, that business might not make it to the second, third generation. Yeah. And there's some businesses that shouldn't. Now, if you're walking down in the mall and you're talking to a business owner who happens to be running the kiosk, great for you. You own your job. Nothing wrong with that. But we're not looking at buy-sell planning for your kiosk. That's not what we're looking for there. If you're selling cell phone cases, you could do it in the mall. You could also do it on eBay and Amazon, right? There's different ways to do that, but you're kind of just a sales distributor. Yes, you're a business owner. Yes, you might have a business entity, but we're talking about you've got a professional practice. You're a doctor. You're a dentist. You're a architect. You have people that work for you. You've got something that is moving forward and creating value, and yet you're not sure what the future of that business is going to be, and you're not sure how that business can work with your family situation. It takes some analysis, takes some coordinating of all those priorities. So it's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Hopefully you can tell that I've got the mind for it. The question is, how do we apply it? How do we put it together for the client to make sure that what they want to have happen will happen? And what they don't want to have happen, how do they have the best happen out of it for what they don't want to have happen? Hope for the best, plan for the worst, and plan also for the best. And I would hope that would make a very happy business owner, even if I've got to be a little blunt in my approach. So I think that's all I've got top of mind here. I just wanted to touch base on some of that stuff. Any other
Yeah.
thoughts, Mike?
No, I think this is good. And if you're a business owner out there and you're listening to this and you have just thoughts spinning in your head or ideas or questions or anything that you might want to look into a little bit, reach out to either one of us and we can get together and just go over whatever the questions, comments, concerns, whatever it is, and see if any of these things are even a fit for your business, if it makes sense, what direction you might want to go, whether it's a life insurance, an annuity product, or whatever type thing that makes sense for your business, or whether there's just other types of planning that you might want to do that you haven't done yet. I mean, we have connections everywhere, literally. So even if it's something that we can't do, we can point you in the right direction. So feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Advisors that we work with, and so I'll just put it with this: I've got a 7-step, 37-point checklist to review with someone to make sure that we've got the planning elements in place for what you want to have happen. So this is not off the cuff. This podcast is off the cuff, but the process of working with the business owner is not. It is well structured, well formulated, and there's a lot of order and organization that goes into it.
Yeah.
And so when we're ready to do that, we'll be able to engage in that way, show you a sample plan of the kind of work that is possible. The question is do we want to have that happen for you? So there's a lot of work behind the scenes on this. So
yeah. And it's not a quick answer, and there's a lot of I just said, there's a lot of options out there, ways that this thing can go. So that's why we have the questionnaire and all the different things, and we might even bring in other people, specialists outside of our own abilities to help with that. And so if you do have questions or you want to get a little more information, feel free to reach out. You could leave a comment, or you could I don't, is your email or the website posted?
My website's on the it's on the YouTube channel, so davidkinderfinancial.com. You can see all the stuff about me, and you can reach out to me there, although my email address is separate. So go to the contact me site portion of my website. You'll be able to reach out to me that way. I turned off comments because I kept getting too much spam, and I don't know what'll happen on Spotify and all the other podcast things, but you can find me. That won't be a problem. And then depending on where you're located in the country, we'll figure out best work with me, best work with Mike, Kurt, whoever's been at Abstentia for the entire year so far. Kurt, we're gonna anyway.
We're both on social media too, on Facebook. Just go by our names, so we're not hard to find. We're not hiding. We're not mysterious people. So, so if either way, I guess the bottom line is, if you have questions, comments, concerns, you want some help, you want to just take a look at something, feel free to reach out. We're here to help. And I flat out told people before, if there's nothing I can do to help them, I can't help them, and maybe there's somebody else that can. So, nobody can help everybody, right? I mean, you can't always help every single person, but we can try.
Every situation is different and unique. So it all, what's our 2 favorite words of this podcast?
It depends.
It depends. I think I'll relaunch it with those 2 words. But anyway, everybody, thank you all so much for watching and listening. Make it a great day. Hit like, share, comment, subscribe. Do the things. But anyway, this was just a brief overview of all the different aspects of business decision owner making, and good exit planning is just good business. And so when you put those things in place, your employees feel more secure. You're going to feel more secure because you're not just putting money back into your business. You're putting it into retirement planning. You're getting the components in place for what you want to have happen. And there's always great results that come from it. In fact, it also helps you to secure new business loans, because banks love to see that you have a succession plan in place, that you have that funding in place to fulfill on those agreements. So there's so much there. It's worth a conversation and discussion. See where you're at, what might need to happen, what are the relationships of the different shareholders. There's so many aspects to it. It's hard we can't give specific advice because, like I said, like everything, it freaking depends. But it's good to find out. And if we don't know, we know who to ask. I've
Right.
got so many different partners in their specializations. We ask them to make sure that we bring the best solutions possible. So it's not about the best plan that I can deliver. It's always about the best plan that me and my team, our teams, can deliver. That's the most important part, because there's got to be more than one mind behind the money and behind the recommendations. So I think with that, I'll leave it at that. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Make it a great day.
See it.
You have been listening to an episode of the Financial Advocacy Podcast. As a reminder, you can't hold us accountable for any actions you take on your own. Just like all financial entertainment shows, we are not providing legal, tax, or securities investment advice of any kind. We do provide general investment information for educational purposes only, and we will discuss alternative financial strategies that do not contain or include securities. You can view all of our disclosures and disclaimers at our website at www.financialadvocacypodcast.com. Look both ways for across the street. Thank you for listening, and make it a great day.